Hi guys, it's Dylan from Bijou Diamond Jewellery in London with another watch video, and today we're looking at a pretty up and coming brand for us at Bijou Diamond Jewellery, and that is Glashütte. So as with all my reviews, let's go back in time and look at the history. We're going to look at the very basic history of Glashütte, the brand. Go back in time now to the 1800s, specifically 1843. Around the 1800s, early 1800s, Glashütte, which is a town in Germany, attracted quite a lot of watchmakers. And in 1843, a few of these watchmakers came together and applied to the German government to get funding to create a factory, a watchmaking factory in Glashütte, the town. And eventually the factory was made and the brand did fantastically, or Glashütte factory did fantastically, which was essentially just a collection of watchmakers under one roof. It wasn't necessarily a brand at that point. Later on, the Glashütte factory realized that many people around the world were replicating their watches and actually printing Glashütte on their movements and their watches when they weren't in fact genuine Glashütte watches. So in 1916, the actual Glashütte factory decided to print their watches with Glashütte Original on the dial. So that's when they gained their name that we see today in 1916, Glashütte Original. And that was a way or an effort to basically kind of show people the difference between a counterfeit Glashütte and the actual version, the real version. Many years passed and the brand or the factory did great. It was essentially a brand, but it didn't really become an official brand like we see it today until 1994. And that's when we really saw it blossom into Glashütte that we see today. That's essentially the history done. That's very, very basic history. If you want to learn more about the history of Glashütte, then go check out their website. They have much more in-depth information there. We've definitely seen a massive rise in interest in this brand within the last year or so. And I think that's down to a couple of reasons. A couple of the main reasons I'd say there are the watches are in general finished all by hand, and the movements are finished by hand. They create everything in-house as well. So the movements are totally in-house movements. All the little screws, everything is created there in the Glashütte factory. That's a huge plus for many watch collectors and enthusiasts, extreme enthusiasts, that really are looking for something that's the essence of that brand, and everything you're buying on that watch is from that brand. Pretty much everything on that watch is in-house, which is kind of rare. Especially, you know, some big brands like Audemars Piguet, not even Audemars Piguet is taking everything in-house. So yeah, that's pretty impressive. Another great point of these watches, these Glashütte watches, is actually that they sit among Langs and Jaegers in terms of quality and craftsmanship. Yet they are at a fraction of the price. Many of the Glashütte watches are much cheaper or much more affordable than some of the brands, you know, competing brands like Lang or Jaeger. So that's definitely a big plus for Glashütte. Also, they make quite a limited watch run, and that definitely appeals to a lot of collectors. They don't want loads and loads of watches that everyone else has. You know, this watch that we're looking at here today, for example, is a limited edition watch. So this model that we're looking at also is one of their most popular models. It's definitely one of our most requested models. In fact, this exact dial and chronograph variation of the 60s collection is one of our most popular watches from Glashütte. This is part of their 60s collection, and their 60s collection is part of their larger vintage collection. The vintage collection looks at 60s and 70s watches, and essentially each watch is, you know, inspired by the 60s and inspired by the 70s. Both very important periods of time for watchmaking and also the world anyway. So that concludes our history and kind of some information on the watch, on the brand itself. Let's take a look at the features of this watch. So we're going to start with the clasp. The clasp is a very simple pin buckle. For some reason I forgot to film it, so apologies for that. So yeah, there's not much to say about it. Very, very simple, nicely machined. Moving on to our leather strap now, which is a beautiful kind of grey, taupey, or maybe even mousy colour, but it looks fantastic against the blue dial. It has that kind of vintage feel to it, which this whole watch really captures. You know, that vintage essence is just amazing on this piece. Moving on to our case now, we've got a 42mm case size on this watch, but it feels more like a 41mm case size. It's in steel on this watch, and it's in all polished finish, which is kind of unique, but actually kind of more true to that 60s style. Most watches back then were all polished finish. It has a beautiful, beautiful vintage feel, this case. I love the design of the case itself. It's just really, really interesting looking. I love the domed crystal, which we'll come into in a moment. I love the pushers, the little hats on top of the pushers on the start chronograph pushers. Just again, a vintage essence and kind of almost like machine or old vintage stopwatch style to it, which I really like. This watch also features a clear crystal case back, but it's not a standard clear crystal case back. It's actually very large. You see a lot of the movement on this watch. The crystal case back is actually domed on this case back, which is really unique, and I actually really love this. I think it's a really beautiful way of displaying the movement through a domed crystal. That domed crystal also matches our domed crystal on the actual top of the watch as well, looking through to the dial, and this kind of whole domed and curvature of the crystal, sapphire crystals on this watch matches the kind of curves and beautiful elegance that the actual case has as well. Everything is really tied in beautifully on this watch. The movement itself is finished to a really nice standard, not quite that of someone like Patek Philippe, but it is still, you know, a very high standard and a beautiful movement as well. Moving now on to our dial, we've got a stunning blue dial. It's kind of a sunburst effect as well. It has this kind of gradient where it's darker out at the edges and comes lighter in the center. Really, really beautiful dial. I think that's why this one was just so popular for us. The dial features many little unique touches that makes it pretty special. The indexes, for example, are kind of dug out inside the dial to create this kind of groove. It kind of adds this three-dimensional feel to the watch. The hand, the minutes hand is also curved downwards to slope with the curve of the dial and to match the curve of the sapphire crystal as well. Just a lovely, beautiful little detail there. Everything on the dial is kind of vintage and I'd say pre-60s. I say this has kind of almost got an early 1900s or 1800s feel about it. It just looks almost like a instrument, like a vintage instrument. It's a very simple, very beautiful, elegant, fine dial. I love the fact that hand, the dome, features of the dial, the grooves, all create this kind of three-dimensional feel to the dial and the actual watch itself. It really pops out and has much more life than just a standard index marker set and hands and crystal. So that concludes our features of this watch. Onto whether or not I would own it. I definitely think I would own this watch. The only thing that would put me back or push me back away from owning it would maybe be the fact that it is slightly on the larger side of what I prefer to wear, even though it does look great on my wrist and I think it does suit me. I would love this watch if it was more like a 40mm case size on what they're displaying, which I think would wear more like a 39. I think this watch would look really, really beautiful in that kind of smaller case size and actually would be more appropriate to what they would have made back in the 60s anyway. But yeah, fantastic watch as it is. I think it's beautiful, definitely an underrated brand, and I'm hoping that they'll continue to grow in popularity with us and also the rest of the watch industry because they are really, really fantastic watches. Thanks guys for watching. As always, if you're interested in this watch or any other watch in the Glashütte collection, then don't hesitate to contact us. Our details are in the description and also at the end of the video. It'd be a pleasure to call one into stock for you.